it has been a tough year for the Grizzlies fans. Some thought they'll bounce back after a down year and make the playoffs. But just like how the Avengers Endgame marked an end of an era for the OG characters, the Grizzlies did the same this offseason by trading away the last player from their grit and grind era. As much as it hurts me as a Grizzlies fan, it was a smart move, especially after trading Marc Gasol to Toronto at the trade deadline. And as Thanos said, inevitable. Everyone knew it was coming after trading Marc Gasol to Toronto at the trade deadline. On the bright side, the Grizzlies now have a good young core to build around and the possibility to recreate Grit and Grind 2.0. Every single move they've made this offseason started with this trade. The Grizzlies traded Mike Conley to the Jazz for Grayson Allen, Kyle Korver, Jay Crowder, the 23rd pick, and a 2020 first round pick. They essentially received 3 first round picks, including Grayson Allen, in the trade, when most people think they could only net 1 for Conley. Korver and Crowder are on cheap expiring contracts, which can be flipped again to bring in additional assets, and they've done that with Korver. The most underrated part of this trade was that they created one of the biggest trade exceptions in the NBA, instead of taking Rubio or Favors contracts, but more on that later. Jay Crowder is a great get for the Grizzlies. He embodies that grit and grind mentality and would be a good mentor to the Grizzlies' young core. I wouldn't be surprised if Crowder starts at the small forward position next season, since this team lacks the spacing around Morant and Triple J. A team can never have too many 3-and-D players, so contenders will be calling about Crowder near the trade deadline, and this would only make the Conley trade look even better. He'll net at least a second-round pick or young player, which is a good return for a player with an expiring contract and doesn't fit the team's timeline. Grayson Allen had an underwhelming rookie season playing for a deep playoff team and never consistently got minutes until the last 5 games of the season. He's either average or below average in all areas, but I do believe his 3-point shooting will come around with more reps. He competes on the defensive end, but his below average lateral quickness limits his ceiling as a defender. He'll either need to improve his 3-point shooting numbers or become a smart defender and position himself well to carve out a role in the NBA. The rebuilding Grizzlies will be a good place for him to get more reps and develop his skills. The Grizzlies once again are lacking shooters, so I do think Allen will get consistent minutes in the upcoming season. Growing with Morant and Triple J will also give Allen the benefit of the doubt for a rare phenomenon in NBA called continuity. The Grizzlies will have 3 more seasons to evaluate him on a cheap rookie contract. The Grizzlies drafted Ja Morant with the 2nd pick in the 2019 NBA draft, which is the obvious choice after trading away Conley. He averaged around 24 points, 6 rebounds, and 10 assists, shooting almost 50% from the field and 36% from 3. I'm not too fond of this year's draft class, and Morant's weaknesses do worry me. There's no question that his playmaking ability is great, but his slim frame, average 3-ball, and finishing at the basket are hard to ignore. Luckily, he did land in a great situation where he'll have the ball in his hands most of the time. Conley had a usage rate of 26.2 and assist rate of 38.9, so without him next season, there will be a massive need for a primary ball handler. Also, having a 3-and-D big in Triple J will help mask his weaknesses as well. He'll put up big numbers in his rookie season, probably with below average efficiency. I think the Russell Westbrook comparison is spot on, because both play with such confidence and pull off explosive dunks, and even their weaknesses are eerily similar. Whether Morant will hit that ceiling will depend on the coaching staff and front office. He'll definitely put up big numbers by having the ball in his hands all the time, like Westbrook did for OKC. It'll be hard to build around him, and might only see similar success, which is one finals appearance. I think it'll be more beneficial to let Morant get more rep playing off the ball, so he won't develop bad habits of watching the offense when he doesn't have the ball. Morant was the 3rd option in his freshman year, so he has some experience playing off ball. He was also a decent cutter and capable off-the-catch shooter in his sophomore year. It'll help that the Grizzlies have multiple playmakers at the guard and wing positions to generate easy looks for Morant off ball. If they put the ball in Morant's hands 24/7, he might never improve his weaknesses like defensive effort and a consistent 3-ball. Without improvement in at least one of these areas, he'll run the risk of becoming a Dennis Schroeder type of player. I'm not saying taking the ball completely out of his hands, but maybe playing him off the ball 30% of the time would benefit the team in the future. With the 23rd pick that they received from the Conley trade, the Grizzlies traded the pick and a 2024 second-round pick to select Brandon Clark with the 21st pick. Clark was projected to go in the lottery, but his size and skill set makes him a tweener, but not for the Grizzlies. With Triple J on the team, Clark is the perfect complement, and getting him with a late first rounder was a steal. One of the most productive player in college basketball last season, Clark has a center skill set in a wing's body. He averaged around 17 points, 9 rebounds, and just over 3 blocks per game, while shooting almost 69% from the field. Clark is a high floor, low ceiling player, and he should be able to contribute from day one. His production will be similar to Larry Nance Jr., which is a fair comparison. Clark overhauled his shooting form when he transferred to Gonzaga. Just look at his shooting form before, compared to now. His 3-point and free throw shooting last year leaves a lot to be desired, but that was such a big improvement within a year. His summer league play was amazing and showed off a capable 3-point shot. I don't think he'll replicate the same performance in his rookie year, but his improvements suggest that he hasn't hit his ceiling yet. At worst, he'll be a defensive specialist and wreak havoc with his athleticism. If he improves on his jump shot or add a perimeter game, he could become a Paul Millsap type of player. For now, he'll be an energizer off the bench playing behind Triple J and Valanciunas. With the record-breaking trade exception, the Grizzlies jumped at the opportunity to absorb Iguodala's contract and add a draft asset. Iggy could mentor the young core, but he'll most likely be gone by the trade deadline. When that time comes, the Grizzlies will add even more asset, or at least a second-round pick. For now, Iggy will provide great defense and some playmaking on the wing. The lack of spacing will be tough, but the Grizzlies aren't trying to make the playoffs this season. The CJ Miles for Dwight Howard trade was purely a financial move. They saved around $3 million through this trade, and since they're planning to waive Dwight Howard, they'll open up a roster spot as well. Had either Miles or Howard stayed on the team, they wouldn't have had a big enough role since the Grizzlies' frontcourt have more proven or young players ahead of them. Trading away Chandler Parsons for Solomon Hill and Miles Plumlee was a lateral move, but it does allow the Grizzlies to start off their rebuild with a clean slate. Last year he was complaining about not getting minutes and yelled out, "Play me!" every time he scored in practice. He wasn't projected to play a big role in this upcoming season, and definitely not taking minutes away from their young core, so he would have been a distraction for the team if he sticked around. This trade basically splits up Parsons' contract into two. The smaller contracts of Hill and Plumlee would be easier to trade again. If they play well, some contenders might call up about them, and if they don't, they're expiring after this season. There is an issue with roster spots after this trade, but it shouldn't be a big deal. Currently they have 17 players on the roster, including Dwight Howard, who they're planning to waive, and rumored signings of Marko Guduric. Yeah, I just butchered the name, sorry. They'll need to cut down to 15 before the season starts, so it'll come down between choosing Marko or Rab. This issue also forced the Grizzlies to cut Avery Bradley and lose Justin Holiday in free agency. They didn't have much of a choice with Holiday since he was an unrestricted free agent. Bradley, on the other hand, had a non-guaranteed deal, which they could have traded to cap-needy teams or contenders for at least a second-round pick, similar to what they did with Korver. The Grizzlies traded Kyle Korver and Javon Carter for Josh Jackson, DeAnthony Melton, and 2 second-round picks in 2020 and 2021 respectively. Everyone knew Korver wasn't going to stick around Memphis long, especially with his non-guaranteed deal, but no one knew the Suns were going to give up that much for cap relief. Both Melton and Carter were second-round picks last year, but Melton had a better season than Carter after being thrown in the fire in his rookie year. He's also 2 years younger and has more size to guard bigger players. This was a buy low trade by Grizzlies to develop Josh Jackson, who was the 4th pick in the 2017 NBA draft. He averaged around 11 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists on below average shooting efficiency. He was projected to be a lockdown defender with some playmaking ability. His shooting was definitely a weakness, but his numbers behind the arc did improve slightly, and that hitch in his jump shot is completely gone. He's been criticized for his poor defense in his short career, but he has shown flashes of great defense, and playing on the worst defensive team in the NBA doesn't help at all. The Grizzlies have good and willing defenders to surround Jackson, so I do believe his defensive impact will be on full display next season. With less of a logjam on the wing than the Suns had last season, Jackson will get more opportunity on the Grizzlies, and he'll get a longer leash with the rebuilding organization. In short, the Grizzlies turned a player who wasn't going to suit up for them into a lottery talent and 2 second-round picks. This is still a good trade even if Jackson never becomes a rotational player. Many criticize the Grizzlies for replacing DeLon Wright with Tyus Jones, but digging deeper into these moves, it makes a lot more sense. The Grizzlies completed a sign-and trade to send Wright to the Mavs for 2 second-round picks, and then signed Jones to a similar contract. Wright is a borderline starter in the NBA, and definitely a better player than Jones right now. So why does this trade make sense? The Grizzlies drafted Morant as their main ball handler, and a starting five of Morant, Wright, Anderson, Triple J, and Valanciunas cannot space the floor. Wright has the experience of playing off-ball, but he has been an erratic spot-up shooter from season to season. He's 27 and entering his prime, so playing him off the bench in a smaller role might not sit well with him. Tyus Jones, on the other hand, is only 23 and will more likely accept his role as a backup. Jones has a reputation of making the players around him better offensively, and the numbers back that up. He's a superior playmaker than Wright based on his assist numbers, and that gap gets even bigger after factoring in turnovers. The Grizzly Bear Blues wrote an article comparing Wright and Jones, so if you want a deeper dive into this, the link is in the description. Grizzlies got 2 second rounders out of it as well. The contract is a little bigger than I would have liked, but Jones was a restricted free agent, so they had to overpay a little. The deal will end when they need to pay Morant and Triple J, and it won't be hard to move a $9 million per year contract in the future. Who knew Jonas Valanciunas will be the player to stay with the Grizzlies from the Marc Gasol trade? He's a good complement to Triple J, a bruiser who would do the dirty work and free up shooters and Morant with his screens. After landing in Memphis, JV was unleashed and averaged almost 20 and 10 in just under 28 minutes, and he continued to expand his shooting range. Obviously, he doesn't fit their rebuilding timeline, but he will be a good stopgap until Triple J and Brandon Clark develops. Grizzlies re-signed JV for 3 years $45 million, which declines yearly. It is slightly an overpay, especially since there isn't much of a market for big men. But his contract will look better if he's able to make threes, and won't be hard to trade if he continues to put up 20 and 10. Here's a summary of their offseason moves. I would give the Grizzlies offseason a B+. It might seem biased, but they started this rebuild on a clean slate, and new GM Zach Lehman pulled off quite a few good trades. He kickstarted the rebuild and turned an old hard-capped team into a solid young core. They'll only have around $45 million in guaranteed contracts next offseason, which allows more flexibility, compared to building a fringe playoff team around aging Conley and Gasol. The Grizzlies shed some salary, gained some draft asset, and now the franchise have a clear direction moving forward. Here's their depth chart. I think they'll start Morant, Brooks, Anderson, Triple J, and JV. I'm not as sure about their starting wings, since Iggy has a championship pedigree, and Crowder provides more spacing without giving up much on the defensive end. Please comment down below on what you think of the Grizzlies offseason. If you enjoyed the content, please like and subscribe, as I'll be analyzing how the other NBA teams did this offseason.